Ladies and gentlemen, a warm welcome to the channel. I am Jessica. Today's story took place in Australia. So, let's begin. In 1938, a farmer in southeastern Australia decided to bring his horses to a field known as Thompson's Paddock, on a farm near Allendale East, a few kilometers south of Mount Gambier. As he was leading the horses across this big wide-open field, one of his horses suddenly just collapsed to the ground. The farmer ran over to see what was going on, but as soon as he got over to it, the horse had stood back up again and seemed completely unhurt. The farmer was puzzled because he had no idea what happened in the first place. And so, he looked down to see if maybe it tripped on something, and he saw on the ground right beneath the horse was this small hole. He moved his horse out of the way. And then when he came back to look at this thing, he saw it was only maybe a foot across, but when he peered down into it, he saw it was very deep. And so, he got down on his hands and knees to get a closer look. And when his eyes adjusted, he could not believe what he was seeing 10 or 15 feet below. The surface was this huge pool of water. The entrance to the sinkhole came to be known as the shaft. The name is claimed to be derived from the bright shaft of sunlight that penetrates through the entrance to the depths on a sunny day. The cave is formed from the dissolution of soluble rocks of porous limestone in this part of South Australia. The main chamber is about 140 meters, 460 feet, long and 80 meters, 260 feet, wide. The water level is about 7 meters, 23 feet, below ground level, and the hole is considerably wider at this point. A rock pile directly under the surface opening rises to a minimum depth of about 36 meters, 118 feet. A tunnel extends to the northwest to a depth of about 80 meters, 260 feet, and another to the east reaches a maximum depth of 124 meters, 407 feet. Because of the hole's size and the drop's height, divers and equipment are lowered into the chamber separately using a hoist system. On May 26, 1973, a group of 9 divers arrived at Mount Gambier in South Australia with the intention of cave diving the shaft. John H. Bockerman, Peter S. Burr, Christine M. Millat, Glenn Millat, Stephen Millat, Larry Reynolds, Gordon G. Roberts, and Robert J. Smith were the 8 divers intending to venture into the cave. A 9th group member, Joan Harper, had decided she wouldn't be diving, and would instead remain beside the sinkhole, preparing hot soup and assisting the group in other ways. The day before the incident, the group completed a successful dive at the sinkhole, extending a shot line approximately 150 feet, 46 meters, into the water and reaching the primary point of interest known as the rock pile, a central pile of limestone rubble about 40 meters directly below the sinkhole entrance. They briefly explored the perimeter of the rock pile before surfacing. With their shot line already in place, the group planned to return the next morning and continue exploring the cavern. The group arrived at the sinkhole on the morning of May 28 after refilling their 72 cubic feet, 2 meter cube, cylinders at Mount Gambier and quickly descended to the rock pile. They had not planned to explore beyond what is known as the edge, a narrow and downward-sloping continuation of the cave on one side of the main chamber, far from the natural light shaft provided by the sinkhole opening. The rock pile was generally considered the boundary for safe recreational diving. The surrounding cavern was dark, unexplored, and covered in loose silt and limestone rubble. Anything beyond this, the effects of nitrogen narcosis becomes extreme if the breathing gas is not diluted by helium. Nitrogen narcosis is a change in consciousness, neuromuscular function, and behavior brought on by breathing compressed inert gases. Separate accounts from the 4 surviving divers were pieced together to establish a timeline of what happened to the 4 victims on that fateful day. At the perimeter of the rock pile, Smith began to feel the effects of nitrogen narcosis. His depth gauge read approximately 180 feet, 55 meters. An experienced diver, familiar with the symptoms of narcosis, Smith signaled to his group that he was returning to the top of the rock pile. The group signaled that they were going to continue exploring. Smith stayed by the rock pile, circling it for around 8 minutes while searching for animal bones. He then saw the torch of Glenn Millat returning from the direction the others had gone. Glenn Millat had been monitoring his air and knew that he was out of time. He had attempted to tap Christine Millat on the arm and remind her that her time was also up, but the two were separated before he could. Smith and Glenn Millat met and surfaced together to find that Larry Reynolds had already returned from his dive. Half a minute later, Peter Burr surfaced with almost no air left in his tank. Knowing the others would have similarly low air supplies, Glenn Millat quickly put on a spare tank and returned to the water. He descended to a depth of 225 feet, 69 meters, where the cliff began to drop off. At the edge, he found Stephen Millat's torch and camera. Significant amounts of silt had been disturbed, and the visibility had reduced to nearly zero. Glenn Millat had no choice but to decompress and return to the surface. By the time he surfaced, an ambulance had arrived at the sinkhole. Peter Burr returned to the cavern for one more look but found nobody. By that point, the group was aware that they were looking for bodies and not survivors. At the end of the planned dive, upon turning around to return to the surface, the surviving divers saw Christine Millat and Gordon Roberts attempt to ascend quickly back to the rock pile. However, instead of ascending along the slope, they went down. They swam straight up, possibly because they were worried their air would be exhausted soon. The two divers swam directly upward into a dome in the ceiling which had no exit. Reynolds reported seeing their torches frantically searching for an exit before Roberts signaled back that they were lost. According to Reynolds, Christine Millat and Gordon Roberts looked frightened. This was the last time the two were seen. Likely suffering from nitrogen narcosis, and surrounded by silt allowing minimal visibility, the two failed to find an exit. They exhausted their air supply and drowned. Their bodies were later found together below the ceiling dome they had failed to escape. One surviving diver says they witnessed a member of their group swimming strongly downward further into the cave. This was John Bockerman, who was likely under the effects of severe nitrogen narcosis and may have been unaware that he was swimming to his death. His body was located about 20 feet, 6.1 meters, further from where he was last seen and was at the greatest depth of the four victims. The fourth casualty, Stephen Millat, may have been seen lost beneath the cave ceiling shortly before the surviving divers surfaced. Although his torch and camera were found deep at the base of the rock pile, his body was found under an overhang at a depth of only 50 feet, 15 meters. Compared with the other victims, little is known about Stephen's final moments, but he was wearing a buoyancy vest and had been found under an overhang. He was likely buoyant at the time of death. In all, only 4 of 8 divers returned alive. A search of the cave by the police underwater recovery squad to a depth of 200 feet, 61 meters, was initiated on May 29, 1973, the day after the accident. The search was brief and no bodies were found. The team was aware that they were underprepared for a dive in such conditions, and the operation was called off. A second attempt was made on May 30th, again unsuccessful. The police search was ultimately postponed as the team sought naval expertise on the dive, the training for which was expected to take several months. Finally, on April 9, 1974, 11 months and 11 days after the accident, all the bodies were recovered. The last body to be recovered was that of John H. Bockerman. Thank you for watching. Feel free to share your comments below, and also consider subscribing so you don't miss any of our weekly uploads. Stay safe and see you next time.